Good morning, Peninsula Grace family. Today's reading comes from Psalm 78, and we're reading Psalm 78 because Jesus quotes a verse from this poem in Matthew 13:35, which was our reading from Monday. So let's look at Psalm 78 and keep in mind that when Matthew quotes Psalm 78, he and his readers have in mind the larger context of the whole psalm. And this psalm recounts the history of God's relationship with an unfaithful Israel from the time of the Exodus up until the reign of David. So that's about 400 years of history in 72 verses. And he opens by saying, I will open up my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from old. That's what's quoted in Matthew 13. And then he tells us why he will reveal these things to us. He says he's going to say what he's about to say so that we might teach the coming generation about the glorious deeds of the Lord. That's verse 4. So that, in verse 7, they will set their hope in God, not forget his works, and keep his commands. Now, as a family pastor, my heart immediately latches on to this verse. And honestly, verse 7 and these three elements could be a mission and purpose statement for everything that we do as a church. But we're going to come back to that in a moment. For right now, I want us to look at the bigger question, and that is, how does the context of Psalm 78 relate to Jesus' words in Matthew 13? And the answer is this, as D.A. Carson, he puts it this way. Just as one of God's prophets, Asaph, spoke under divine inspiration to disclose narrative previously hidden from some of God's people in his day, so now the divinely inspired Jesus reveals previously hidden truths in parables. So remember that in Matthew 13, Jesus first speaks to the crowds, and he speaks to them in parables in order to veil the truth from those whose hearts were too callous to receive his message. And he quotes Isaiah 6 to kind of make that point. But now in the latter half, in the second half of the chapter, he uses parables as an act of grace because he's speaking to his disciples. And he does this to show them the mysterious things of the kingdom. And he quotes Psalm 78 here to make that second point. So what do we take away from all of this? Well, from Psalm 78, we learn something of Jesus. In his grace, he is a teacher. He is a discloser of hidden things. And just as Asaph called his hearers to teach their children, the coming generation, so Jesus would call his disciples to teach others and call them to repentance. And this is true for all of us, whether we're married with kids in the home, whether we're empty nesters, whether we're married without kids, whether we're single. We are to follow our teaching Messiah. Yet certainly this begins in the home, beginning with our marriages and then extending out to our children. So consider this as a family. How can we encourage one another to set our hope in God, to not forget his works, and to keep his commandments? That's verse 7 again. Where could we grow in this? How could our family rhythms be tweaked to help us grow in this? This is our purpose. This is what we are to be about as a family. So let's own that purpose. Have a great Wednesday, church.